Luke has just a little different take. This is from Luke 22. Now the feast of the unleavened bread drew near, which is called Passover. And the chief priests and scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people. Then entered Satan into Judas, surnamed Iscariot, being a number of the 12, and he went his way and communed with the chief priests and captains how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and covenanted to give him money, and he promised and sought opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of the multitude. John has the smallest mention, and he only mentions that the Jews want to kill Lazarus as well as Jesus, because once Jesus had raised Lazarus from the dead, he became even more popular. And a lot of the leaders of the Jewish nation then began to believe in Jesus. And the Pharisees and the chief priests began to see that they were in deep trouble, that Jesus was gaining more popularity than they were. And so they felt they had to do away with him. It was not until during supper that John mentions that Judas was the one who was to betray Jesus. Another event often connected with Wednesday of Holy Week, especially as I mentioned in the Eastern Orthodox Church, is the anointing of Jesus by a woman. Now, if there's any subject in the New Testament that has more confusion related to it than this, I'm not sure. Some interpreters of the New Testament try to bring all of the instances of this into one instance, and they're certainly confusing and conflicting events. So I'd like to say that there are at least 2 and perhaps even 3 anointings of Jesus by a woman, once named and other times not named, but indicated being an evil woman, a woman of the streets. So obviously it's more than one situation. Matthew and Mark both say that it was Jesus' head that was anointed. Luke and John say, no, it was his feet. Luke puts it early in Jesus' ministry in the house of Simon, once called Simon Pharisee and another time called Simon a leper. So if this was the same incident, then the Pharisee was a healed leper, and perhaps even healed by Jesus. But I think even those 2 events could be separate. So perhaps there are at least 3. 1 early in the ministry and then 2 later in the ministry. 2 of the anointing of the head of Jesus and 2 of the anointing of the feet of Jesus. But they seem to have similar effect and impact upon the people who were watching, especially the disciples. And you'll see this because I'm going to read each of the passages to you. So one was early in his ministry and the others closer to Holy Week. Mary, who is the sister of Martha and Lazarus, anointed the feet of Jesus the evening before Palm Sunday. So even though I'm talking about this event being celebrated on Wednesday before the Last Supper on Thursday, it doesn't fit that way with John. It happened earlier. So I'd like for you to listen to the scriptures of these events. And there are 4 different readings. I want to read the Luke passage first because this is the one that comes from early in Jesus' ministry. This comes from Luke chapter 7. And one of the Pharisees desired him, that is Jesus, that he would eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house and sat down to meat. And behold, a woman in the city, which was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at meat in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster box of ointment, and stood at his feet behind him, weeping, and began to wash his feet with tears, and did wipe them with the hair of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed them with the ointment. Now when the Pharisee which had bidden him saw it, he spoke within himself, saying, This man, if he were a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman this is that touches him, for she is a sinner. And Jesus answering said to him, Simon, and I read that part to identify him as Simon the Pharisee. Jesus went on to talk to him about people owing somebody money, one person owing a great deal of money, one person owing a little bit of money. Both of them were forgiven by the person to whom they owed the money. And Jesus said to Simon the Pharisee, who do you suppose loved the most? The application is obvious because he said, Simon, I entered your house, you never even gave me water to wash my feet. But since I've been here, this woman has not ceased to wash my feet with her tears and to wipe them with her hair and to anoint them with the ointment. That's the first. From Matthew chapter 26. It came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he had been teaching in the temple, he said to his disciples, you know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover. After 2 days. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday evening, Passover. We're talking about Wednesday. You know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people to the palace of the high priest, who is called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. Now when Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, Bethany is where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus lived, but he's in the house of Simon the leper. And this is Wednesday of Holy Week. There came to him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. But when his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, to what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor. When Jesus understood it, he said to them, why trouble you the woman? For she has worked a good work on me. You have the poor always with you, but me you have not always. For in that she has poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this, that this woman has done, be told for a memorial of her. Mark, similarly, in chapter 14 says, after 2 days was the feast of the Passover. Wednesday again. The Passover and unleavened bread, and the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might take him by craft and put him to death. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar of the people. And being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious, and she broke the box and poured it on his head. And there were some that had indignation within themselves, and said, why was this waste of the ointment made? For it might have been sold for more than 300 pence, and have been given to the poor. And they murmured against her. And Jesus said, let her alone. Why trouble you her? She has worked a good work on me. For you have the poor with you always, and wherever or whenever you will, you may do them good. But me you have not always. But she has done what she could. She has come beforehand to anoint my body to the burying.